So this was a game that came out about a year ago, and I saw a lot of people posting about it, and I just didn't really get into it until basically right now. And because I like to wait until things, they still talk about it. Anyway, it's really strange because it's an 8-bit style game with basically very limited controls. A lot of the notes that you find, you basically collect notes and use your cross to do damage facing the enemy that is attacking you. And this could be anything from, a creature to a demon to another character. And it's a horror-based, Exorcist-esque sim, basically. And when you first start the game, it's very kind of tedious because you're in this open world. But once you finally kind of get into the second chapter, it gets more story focused, more railroaded scenarios. So in the first part, you're just using your cross on certain objects and getting different notes from it. And so it's very bare bones, but you really see how the game grows between chapter 1, 2, and 3. And even though the entire game is mostly 8-bit, what occurs is that there's certain cutscenes where, I guess using rotoscoping or something, it has very distinct colors for characters, and you can really make out, that's a real person doing pseudo mocap, basically. And those are kind of the cutscenes of the game. The loads are very long and typical of like a more realistic style of writing. I don't really mind them, but it's kind of like, it's kind of padding on a game like this that doesn't have a lot going for it. And kind of at the beginning of the first chapter, you do this exorcism on this girl, and then you choose either, there's like 5 separate endings. Either you can kill her, kill the monster, kill a deer, or just leave without doing anything, and then you end up being killed by the monster in your car. I think what is actually really effective in a horror setting, even in this art style and sound style, is the music and also the dialogue. When you're walking around and it's just quiet and you have this 8-bit voice of the monsters coming saying, "Let me worship you," or something, it's very, very uncanny and very disturbing. And this first chapter is really not engaging. I honestly thought about dropping it in this first chapter, but really it's really less than a foretaste of what's about to happen, especially in chapter 2 and really chapter 3. The story, the voice acting gets much better in chapter 2. In chapter 3, in chapter 2 you go to a graveyard and you have these little boss fights and things, and you actually get to destroy the enemies, and here you're just warding off things. And the story is basically about 2 priests, Priest Garcia and the other priest whose name escapes me, and they basically are sent to exorcise this girl called Amy, and there's a whole backstory as exactly why she's possessed and why she's cursed and what's going on. And so basically, and her parents, and the antagonist is, you find out there's this cult run by this guy called Gary, and everyone like sends letters to Gary to like praise him and to be free. And then you start, and chapter 2, I mean the whole game, because it's done, I guess, in development, the story's kind of all over the place, but in a not bad way, in a sense like, oh, here's one scene, here's another scene. It feels like a Pulp Fiction or a Tarantino movie, essentially, where a bunch of scenes take place out of order, but it still makes sense for the overarching plot of the game, which is really nice. So there's a scene where you go to a clinic downtown, and they're trying to like summon demons, and by impregnating women with demon seed and things like this. You live in your little flat and you drive around saying, the tagline of the game is that what I'm about to do has not been approved by the Vatican. So you have to do all these kind of like roundabout things, and you learn about the story in a kind of a weird chronological order. There's a lot of really cool animations, a lot of really cool sound design, and I really would encourage you to, it's funny, when you start the game, you can choose chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you don't connect with chapter 1, I would at least try chapter 2, if not chapter 3, because that's where things got really, really interesting. A really good level design is that you're in this apartment block, and essentially in this apartment block, everyone or most people are basically possessed, and you get these really cool segments where you think, how could an 8-bit game be scary? Well, there's this one part where you have to make your way through the apartment, and all you have is a camera, so you press the space bar to basically have 1 second of vision, and you'll see, the horrifying images on the wall, or sometimes you'll actually be interrupted with a cutscene of like someone looking at you. So the detail and the big picture kind of meld, and it kind of jump scares you a little bit. That being said, I don't feel there are a lot of or too many jump scares in this game. It's very more so unnerving, and the audio design is just very uncomfortable. It is cool. Later in the game, there's a whole segment where like one of the guys gets a shotgun, and you have to do this almost horde mode of like defending against these demons and these cult members. And it really does emphasize that you're supposed to find all the clues in the investigations. There's the apartment block, there's the graveyard, there's places like the daycare. And in each one of these things, I think it's kind of easy to miss a critical piece of information. Like I got to the end of the apartment buildings, and the woman that wasn't the woman I was looking for, or like your friend, my job was to like save her, and a demon came and possessed me and made me kill her. And it was kind of like, I wasn't sure if I could continue because the game was letting me continue. But you definitely need to go back and like redo that segment and like load your last save, and so you can get the full picture. What this game made me realize is that the effectiveness of horror games in a interpretive art form like 8-bit, 16-bit, or 64-bit, where you're not showing exactly what it is, you can potentially do much more graphic things because the user's imagination fills in those gaps. They talk about very disturbing things that they do to the human body, and it really reinforces the concept or the idea of what a Satanist actually is, or what these evil religions actually are. It's what they really truly net effect believe essentially is that they are 100% materialists, in the sense that they don't regard a human being or anything about a human being sacred. Like, you are just atoms. So that's why if they cut off your arm, those are just atoms being separated from other atoms. It's no different from a tree branch breaking off. And so in that mindset, there's nothing sacred about human beings or the soul or children. They can just do whatever they want. And it was kind of a good way of really putting your mind into it without being, it's a very disturbing game, honestly. It's not just a horror game. It's like, I would say eerily realistic things, about like, if you did set up a cult or something, or a thing, it's not like in this super fantastical world. It's like in people's apartments and buildings and in the basement of daycare centers, and it's eerily believable, I would say. Despite the actual appearance of the game, it feels a little bit more real than other horror games you might play, which are fantastical on the surface, is a way to put it. But yeah, the game itself, it's not terribly long. You could probably beat it in a day if you, started it early and knew what you were doing. You may not get the perfect ending you want, but it's really a mood, which is, like a mood game, and which is perfect because indie games supposed to give you a distinct kind of energy, a distinct kind of idea that's unorthodox and interesting, and with enough entertaining gameplay to pull you through the story. And it accomplishes all those things. It's not the greatest game in the world. It's definitely not the best horror game, but it is interesting and refreshing to see like a game where you play as like a church good guy, where you have, a It's usually these kind of characters are always the enemies, but because you're like a freelance exorcist, you are technically also against the church and the authority figures as well. But yeah, it's kind of a very unique vibe, to be a 8-bit exorcist, and I think what it does honestly well. It's not anything super preachy or whatever. It's just like, this is just your little adventure through Hell, frankly. And the animation is pretty interesting. It's unique. It's a passion project, and you can really feel that through the game. And it is a unique thing to have a weapon as a cross. I remember the last time I saw that was Dante's Inferno, and it was actually a lot of fun. The cross weapon was, it had a projectile 3-span thing, and it felt really good to use, actually. But anyway, it's definitely worth a shot. Not the greatest, horror game, but definitely worth it just for the experience. But it is honestly a very intense game, and I think I will put that disclaimer that it's not scary as much as it is honestly disturbing. And that's kind of, when you're in this niche market where you are like a niche video game developer, you need to make something that does kind of shock people. So I understand the need for that, and it does it in a somewhat tasteful manner. So Faith, I'd say it's worth a shot. Go ahead and try it out, and that's it. See ya.